Good evening, Mayor Council, Montreal Lost to Flyers. I would like to call the uh, Planning and Development Committee of the whole meeting number 6 to order. I need a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda, please. Moved by Councillor Lucasy, seconded by Councillor Shepherd. All those in favor? Thank you. There's no minutes. Declaration of interest. If not, moving along, I'd just like to apologize for the committee to convene at the being late. We had some issues going on for a bit. We were dealing with other issues, but now we're back on schedule. Number 4, deferred business and table items, and we have 4A cabins verbal by Mayor Bell. Go ahead, Mayor.
I have nothing to add at this time. It's just this is a standing item on this agenda until planning comes back with some information for us. Oh, they marked us.
Mark.
Thank you. If I could take this opportunity just to chat for a few minutes, and fundamentally I'd like to ask for some direction or feedback from council. So I had a whole series of questions that went through my mind on this issue. The translation is concurrent, right? So I don't have to pause, I can just keep going? Okay.
Sorry, Mark. Just make sure you're a little bit slower because we only have one translator tonight.
Okay. So I'd like to get a better idea as to what peak hour council's thinking in terms of cabins. What are you trying to achieve? So for example, are you interested in limiting the size of cabins? If so, did you have some sense as to what size might be appropriate? Did you want to try to regulate the type of construction? You know, would cabins have to be made out of recycled or reused materials only? There's also the concept of access. Did council want to try to control access? You know, I've walked around some areas and there's quad tracks all over the place. So did you want to try to control the access to cabins? There's lots of other questions. How were you thinking about separation distances between cabins? Is it just first come, first serve? Or do you feel there should be a minimum separation distance between cabins? And I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I'm sure there's a lot of questions, and I think the previous motion introduced was to ask the staff to look into options of dealing with cabins, and your approach at this time right now is very good, because those are the similar questions I think a lot of us have. But I know that there's some questions as also. I'll start with Councillor Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope it wasn't the intent of council to put onerous restrictions on building materials and things like that when it comes to building cabins, but one of the things I had considered was the separation issue. I would just like to see us follow the guidelines already existed on federal and QIA recreational leases. I believe it's 300 meters or 300 feet. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but I'd like to see that emulated as much as possible in our own bylaw. The only other concern I have is the potential for some sensitive lands or some lands within the municipality that people might want to set aside and restrict access to. I'm not in a position to advise on that. Obviously, some of our fellow councillors would be able to provide more input than I would. Perhaps we could, consult with QIA on that, maybe the Clark committee. But that's my only real input to to the question posed.
Thank you. And I have Mayor Bell.
Thank you, Councillor Kumlik. I agree with Councillor Shepherd. The only thing I was thinking maybe, so we had a discussion about it, Amy and I at one point, that maybe we would do closer to the city would be like a 5-year lease. Outside would be 10, further out in the corners of the city municipal boundaries that it would be 20 years maybe, because we know we're not going to make it to that location in 20 years for development. But for developmental purposes, to have some sort of scale where we would be able to recover that land, knowing that we may be going back to that area to build a new subdivision. A good point on the recycled, because mine is almost 75% recycled, and maybe, like, for me, I don't care. Mine's already built. It is what it is. But maybe for land lease purposes, when for new land lease purposes or for new cabins being built, try not to give myself a benefit, that, you know, using recycled material would give you a cheaper lease, something to that nature, which would also cancel some of the barriers that may be caused by the cost of a lease and material. So I think those are my 2 points anyways. And I think Councillor Kumlik is right that having options come back, and then we would have a better understanding. But I like this idea too.
Thank you, Mayor Will. I have Councillor Netta next.
Mira, ada ba may kruama tanda solumeyo. Loko sa kaya nga tisakatraw. Ona kayo may eksasi iya sitikot nokta mikitikulong. Solo iya ta miteko ilure tang matapane ko sinane. Itong sa teke itong sa Uang ingat waktu nak kurumat yang mana kirapat, kau kirapat. Takwa takusima yang naik ane itlojan. Angin ini kirap, angin ini teko mikirap telu piungan matan. Solo teko takusima yang angin walau roti nam teko. Teko ina mangirok sumayo teko vinimuda solo king wa yalwa meche warak sumagbato tupi gurapan kusinane tupaksima ko yo waramumada amma igyo ko yang itiasuti ikalu kartun solo teko aku dengar ikamamaramata tapane karena sedikit kunut suruh kaya mayor member nono kota ta ione cukai temukwa kalau ikan nagadiga piyu nak betul aja itu bukan ione siapa tu karena mikir tekunnya kau di kau nengin ta sila tane ini nono kota ne gabang nono kota ne kekore tutok bekau tiam tu kita kembali kekun so ibu ko tutok bersama tiam ibu ni kini kacen kalau kita nak Maria taja so bisa katakan
And that's what I heard too.
you know kita ione
And it's in land that they can control. And they have to follow the
Ako tila ko sa kurata.
but if we try to build a road up there, it's going to cost a lot of money.
Tuksa ko, pinok tuksa ko.
You may find some money through requests. That's what I wanted to say.
Ato ba ang kuram, nasa troktika, ikaw, ilo ko rin.
Buildings that are now
Tanda, ano kaya? Iya to may tiyak ulit,
we should stop the secret
Ani na
building,
ota ay ko
and if we
ito
have
sa
to
mga
approve
pero
cabin
na
being built,
akyabot.
we can
Na
approve it,
refa
or
ya tumakon. Ay, tana inutito ukatok tunga kusina na iglokang medyo
not the Inuit way
kisya
to
na
build
tung
something near a river.
ataw siya nga
More than one time,
na iklolan ikitok sa mga katawikit at kadak sa mga lamata umatin upagnak pa po ako kayo man ito lang ito na itang wala ako na kayo man na isa maksu kanok to tigit yan na tabot siya na ko video tigilo una nunang ko tayo magkitikulo isa maksu tigilo lagi kinanungin na tiyo ako yung siya yung wala nakiluan mat siya na tine ilagay kene onda kulo kuparak simulak mo na tine siguro na kita medyo karna nga una nunang ko kasi ang iriya ako nakpat manaw na gani kaya may ako ilak simulak to kasi ani susak tayo yakti manong nga matso kami inaw nakataw to doon kay una simulak po isumagin ko ang dugo kahit ko singit ka kaya kakatigo tingin nga ako tigo pimura kaya tama ko sa kaya na tabot kano ang ko nang rasam ni ikawala ilum mata bigiyuti panele ang iyuti bagay mo iglogya ang gluti tapos wala kan ko sa mic na kuto ingkajuti ikibota tapongken dan isya magsasaya ko digikhatam na
Thank you, Councillor Top. And I have Sheila, Councillor Clarity.
Thank you, Chair. I'm concerned with the proximity of some cabins. So that's something I've heard recently that not up the river where the big ones are, but closer to the city core. There's people that go down fishing at the river, and they feel like they're intruding on people's privacy, where it never felt that way. People going fishing, walking down to the river. Another thing that's concerning to me is the number of cabins that are currently there, and even the ones that are bigger up the river, still on municipal land, is I don't know what the correct term is, but human waste management. I just was at Lena Ivik's Saco camp last week for Peruvik's Inuktitut week, and she mentioned to us, the 13 of us that were there last week, that she had an outhouse type of structure for us for our time there, but she said if it wasn't there, her knowledge that she wanted to make sure that we understood is you don't want to relieve yourself close to the water because of the fish. It's the fish habitat, and you don't want to introduce human thank you pee or excrement, and then you don't want to go. You want to make sure that when you're on the tundra, on the Nuna, that you also have to be mindful that you don't want to change the patterns of where caribou go, because they can, the wildlife can you can put them off by the smell of human waste. So that's also right up there as a concern, is how is that going to be managed? Yeah. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I have Councillor Awa.
Kuya na make sure out. Unali. Wangali sumalu ko tinaktakali. Tikpani sidik kuno na kota ta ilwani. Maka angerluta akarluta piyunna ta kauta. Maana igluta ako mayok ta kapat. Kauyi makuwatta angit yakong itigut. Angirayang itungali imirtarbi ta kanigiyan piyumayo kapat. Angirayang imiyong ataw tollo tainna tinalo kakbi ulun na kanigiyan ang bulun ni agtakbi o kanigiyan tamakuninga angirayang itunga angikatarniyagot ta akakatarniyagot ta tamakuninga uwatin tuksira katalorniyak pata itluta ako mayut nuna lipaw yakut nuna kutinga ta iluani amma uminga o kakanaklunga takwa nuna lipaw yakut ikanayaking bulun ni nuna lipaw yakut ubagot parnaksima bita nakut iglulew katalakek sa sibuliksat din nakawani 14-15 itlunni unang warta kutlugo pero palyena mat narunang ito iglu kakbiksay ako siwlak ming mata akawo 10-20 anigok sidlugi taikwa iglu kaktu nunaripoyo iluan ito tikitawlak tukso matatamatami imaka akisiwagirutta maligalyok pagirutta iglulok si mayok takaw magpun iglulok mayok takaw pat akaw narluta angakon narluta akaw tiksabu iman na ito yung nakto kanilok may mitapin upang iglokak piksaw lakman akaw tuwat ay anigok pat makuninga akikisimagot tatayma taman na akaw naksawayak ta uwat tinyo nunak inakotit tinyo.
Thank you. Mark, I'm going to get back to you. Just hold on, take note. I have Deputy Mayor Brewster.
Thank you, Councillor Akumelik. So I have a number of things that I'm concerned about. Number one, I think a lot of issues can and should be addressed by having a small working group or a committee of Iqaluit. I've been here back in Iqaluit for 18 years now, and I'm very much aware that I'm still new to Iqaluit. And I think it's really important for us to build our knowledge of traditional uses of land that fall on within city boundaries, and that any permitting that we do takes that into account, that it's informed by Iqaluit. I also believe that that if we are to create land leases for building cabins, that they should be either free or nominal cost to Iqaluit, and that that when cabins pass or when, because a lot of transient people are building cabins, and I have anecdotally noticed that the cabins pass between friends and people who know each other, and people often who have the means to build cabins are people who are here working in Iqaluit and have disposable income to be able to do that. So I feel that Iqaluit should have first right of refusal to any newly built cabin or any cabin that is leased on city-owned land, so that hopefully we can help citizens, Inuit citizens of Iqaluit who have been here for generations to be able to enjoy traditional activities on the land. I agree that the issue of garbage, human waste, and trails are a major issue that even just in the short time that I've been here, I have seen a massive change in the way that trails are cropping up, be they during the spring and summer or even the winter. I am often really concerned about seeing new snowmobile trails that essentially go nowhere, that could lead people into grave danger if they don't know where they're going, if they don't know that they're actually not going to on a trail that connects to anywhere. So I think that group of people of Iqaluit as advisors would help to ensure that that doesn't happen. So there should be a limitation on people building new trails, and on staying on existing trails. Even just veering off a trail for 20 meters has an impact on how wildlife moves. And it has an impact on traditional activities because if you're blazing a new trail into a berry patch that generations of families have been counting on, then you're having a very long-lasting impact because it takes decades, if not hundreds of years, for tundra to regenerate. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. There's a lot of questions raised and concerns. One of the things that I just want to add to the concerns or question is if any of the members of the council indeed have a cabin within city limits, are we in conflict in discussions and making decisions? So I'm sure you all wrote the questions down and concerns. Mark, would you like to comment?
Thank you. I appreciate that input. So there's very early stages, but just some preliminary ideas that are been floating around. So one might be, could we consider requiring the cabin people to form an association, and then in a sense they self-regulate or self-police? Now, council may want to establish some sort of policy or regulations that perhaps once a year this association has to come and present the council. So that's just one idea floating around. I'm going to bounce around here. The local company that operates drones has provided an invoice saying that they can do a type of inventory for about $26,000. So there's some discussions about the need to establish an inventory for cabins. How many are out there? I don't know. We don't know. One suggestion I thought was good was if we do an inventory, it would probably be wise to have like GPS coordinates, and then if we make these available, that could serve as emergency shelters in rough weather conditions or in winter if someone gets lost. So there may be a positive side to this as well. I've taken the liberty of contacting the fire marshal and the building inspections just to sort of ask them for some preliminary thoughts and preliminary feedback. I haven't heard from them yet, but I've made that step. Services was one of the issues that we've sort of thought about and kicked around. You know, for example, perhaps we might want to establish some sort of fees, and then at major entrance areas, perhaps the city may consider providing a large garbage bin, so when people are coming back off the land from their cabins, they have somewhere to put their garbage. That's just sort of one idea. The concept of sensitive lands or areas to stay away from. So some areas for sure would be the gravel areas, the aggregate resources where there's quarries, the new landfill, the water protection area, so the whole watershed that protects the reservoir itself. So those are some early preliminary ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Deputy Mayor Brewster.
Thank you, Councillor Kumilik. Sorry, I also meant to talk about fires and fire pits. This is also something that I've observed in, especially in the last couple of summers. People are building fires and creating fire pits in areas that are normally used for hunting and for other traditional activities. And the impact of burning and leaving burnt goods behind can have an impact on people's ability to harvest wildlife, and also to they're an eyesore. So I think it's really important to consider that when we're regulating cabins.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other questions or comments? But I think those are very valid questions and concerns, and you're going to get more, Mark. I'm sure you're going to get more. We still have yet to listen from the residents. I'm sure there's a lot of ideas. Can we move along with the agenda if there's no more questions on the cabin issue? Okay, thank you, Mark. And we'll move along to new business. And under 5A, we have request for decision land administration bylaw number 897, and we have Amanda Wells. Go ahead.
Actually, I'm going to give a brief overview here for an introduction. So the land administration bylaw, the review has been ongoing for at least 2 years, I think 2.5 years, something like that. So from a staff perspective, we've been working quite hard to try to bring this to closure. We've had meetings with the CAO, we've had meetings with CGS, and we've tried to address the various outstanding issues. Now, earlier in the process, we tried to advance the previous version. So the previous version had been given readings and we were trying to continue on, but CGS said no, we had to start over again at first reading. So that will be the recommendation that we're asking for tonight, is for the first reading. So just a couple of highlights. We're recommending that we go to 99-year leases. So the convention to date has been 30-year leases, but the legislation allows for 99 years. If we do this, it reduces the administrative burden on staff. It also reduces the burden on lessees, on leaseholders. And the other highlight I'd like to mention is the ballot draw has been simplified. There's 2 categories. And through affirmative action, we've endeavored to give advantage to Inuit. And so the recommendation is basically, we're requesting that first reading be given to the bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Lucas.
Kaya namig magkuna ko nga kana ulla amaulu lima kalima ko inun natuka ngayo category 1 inuti suna mga kay mga teka ko ba category 2 tan category 1 o kaksi mama Inuit money to kaluni for 2 years amuyaw ko nga tayo sa mumani for ballot draw amalu natana namagitata kakakise category 2 namagitata ko kawi makobasse takwago inong itu 2 years ikaloni kunang ata amu yoga kunak sutitao tana liso 5 years muloni asijing labutako akalona ubaloni potiki inong itu utura kunang ata ilumo tako ilu tatakwe 10 years mago yokai khalo me pia ngata kina jamata aula sitakwe tana le ilok joni vesa ga yawli takko so summa ila tana 2 years pasima you 5 years mo asijik tagun nang mga isamagi baga amalo stage 1 lasima you tana ballot draw inunno 30% twinna so 30% twinna me inunno tunisina kita 30% namaging itaktaga summalike 60% mga inunno tunis qagluta tana apik kutiri baga amma namagitte qangna kullu mitana 60% muloni 80% muloni asijak tawloni summa takwa 30% mutin na kainunno tuni yang sutwi ammalo takwa khalluna inung itu 2 years to na khallune gunna qat khallune gunna pata summalike tana asijak logo asijak nang itu 5 years kuyan nami akomale.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Awa.
Kuya na may iksura ako mali. Unare apakatigilan na sugo. Kaya mga pakuyong nga ako tin. Kaya kaya mga ito nga pakuyong nga ako. Ukalimakta ko yun ni pakuyong nga ako. Sibulang mik. Ang mapakuyong nga ako. Ukalimakta ko yun ni at pangani. Kaya nakaya pakuyong nga ako. Pigiyak titiwin na nagkatarakak pa una ukasa kamu sibulat pamin kalimakta yarakam nga pitiwin ko yung make sure.
Thank you, Mark.
We're starting over again at first reading. Community of Government Services required us to start over. And it is a new bylaw.
I think Councillor Awa is asking if we need to rescind the old bylaw, if I'm correct.
I believe there was a motion to read the bylaw, and there's a second motion to read the bylaw. Should we kill the bylaw before proceeding this first reading? Thank you.
Mark or Amanda?
Bylaw 853, the previous bylaw that we were doing, received 2 readings, but I believe that if we don't do a 3rd reading, it just dies on the floor. So we're going on now to a new bylaw that we're starting over with, and it's bylaw 897. So this would be the new bylaw, the 897, and it's that we're asking to recommending that it go to council for first reading. We have to do first reading, and then it needs a public hearing after that. So we're just asking tonight to proceed to first reading. Thank you.
I have Sheila Flaherty.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to know what the old bylaw number is, just for typo. This is the first page, this only page that says 897 on my paper, so it needs to be changed on the top. And then I'll move to recommend to council, but this also on the recommendation that needs to be corrected to 897. Currently it says 987. So.
Okay. I have Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kumalik. Just to go back to what Councillor Lucasy was speaking about on section F of the ballot draw. As I said earlier, I'm very much aware that even though I'm a Nunavut Inuk, I'm new to Iqaluit. And so category 1, I think, should reflect a standing order and agreement that any Iqaluit, regardless of whether they leave and come back, should be eligible to be in a draw for a parcel of land, and that perhaps it should be revised to say that Iqaluit are eligible by virtue of their being born here and having generations of families live here, and that also any Nunavut Inuk who has resided here for at least 2 years would be eligible under that clause.
Okay. Kyle Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd be happy to second the motion to recommend to council to adopt this. At the same time, I just want to provide a little bit of history. The previous council did a lot of work in preparation for this bylaw. We did complete second reading. There were legal concerns with the format of the ballot draw. It is illegal for us to differentiate between Iqaluit Inuit and other Inuit. There's a feeling that we can defend the position taken in the affirmative action within this bylaw to give Inuit preference. The potential still exists that could be challenged. There could be a human rights challenge to that. I'm personally of the opinion, and I believe administration is of the opinion, that we can defend this legally to give Inuit some preference when it comes to access to land. When it comes to the actual specifics, when it comes to the percentages in this bylaw, when it comes to the public consultation and second reading, we can get into the actual numbers that are in here, and we can make changes any way we want. The important thing today is to get this tabled, get first reading, get a public consultation underway, and then if we want to make changes to what's in this document, if we want to, see how far we can push the affirmative action measures and things like that, we can deal with that at second reading. So tonight's not the best time to debate what's in the bylaw. The important thing is to get this tabled.
Thank you for the clarification. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. So for clarity, there is an error, and I apologize, but in the header, the bylaw number should be 897, so that would need to be corrected moving forward. Also, for clarity and addressing one of the concerns, on the first page of this bylaw 897, for clarity, it may be wise to add, so there's the first and whereas, the second and whereas, and then the third, what I'm going to suggest is we could add, and whereas bylaw number 897 repeals and replaces bylaw 365. So 365 is the current existing one, and then that would make it very, very clear. This one here.
Okay, thank you. I have Solomon Awa.
Kayo waktinga okomatu nakawya takwa first reading to nang kayumaro second reading mi okasayo na nakapinami.
Okay, because we're at the committee sitting, it's a form of recommendation to the council. Just to be clear. Mayor, did you want? Okay. We have a motion on the. I think a recommendation to adopt. Would you like to move that? Oh, Sheila did. Sorry. Any seconder? Shepherd. Any questions or comments to the motion, or can Mayor Bell?
Thank you, Councillor Kumar. I just want to make sure that the motion is first reading and land administration bylaws. Recommend to council that we have the first reading. Correct? Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Lucasi.
I'm just gonna state a comment. Thanks, Akumalik, I'm just gonna put a comment of a comment that was just said. An Iqalummute is an Iqalummute is an Iqalummute. Like, I've been here for 14 years. My husband's been here since he was born. My kids been here since they were born. We shouldn't be dividing other Inuit that are residing in Iqaluit, making a living, and calling Iqaluit home. It's just what I'm thinking. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments to the motion or to the recommendation? If not, all those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Unanimous. Thank you. Does the interpreter want a break or no? You okay? Good man. Moving along, we have 5B, request for decision, repeal and replace general plan number 703, general plan and zoning bylaw number 704, zoning bylaw for general plan 898 and zoning bylaw number 899, housekeeping amendments, revisions. Mark? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So a few opening comments, just to inform the committee and council. After a few months, I realized, staff is working with different versions of the bylaws. We don't all have the same version. The general plan is vintage 2010. There's been 11 amendments since then. In the copy of the general plan I've been using, the 3 annexes, those are the development schemes, they're missing. I've been in meetings with the GN when they've showed me different conceptual plans, and I had no idea what they're talking about or where it came from. I didn't have the material. I hadn't seen it. So that's very brief about the general plan. And now the zoning bylaw, same thing. Staff is working with different versions of the bylaw. I have a version that has schedules and maps in the back. I've got another one that doesn't have schedules or maps in the back. Similarly, the zoning bylaw is vintage 2010, and there's been 20 amendments since then. So, to summarize briefly, staff, we don't have consolidated copies, and the concern is that we can't rely on ourselves to be providing accurate information to people when they're making inquiries or to developers, because we just don't have the consolidations. Heads up, we have run into lots of discrepancies between the existing zoning maps that we have and our digital mapping GIS. So we're often really struggling to give clear information to people. So just to sort of stress that we need current bylaws, we need consolidated bylaws, both from the city perspective, from staff perspective, and if it goes through, then certainly we'll update the website as well. So tonight, what is staff trying to do? We're trying to advance housekeeping amendments. Now, these were previously addressed by a different consulting firm in an earlier RFD about just over a year ago. And the previous council did approve it and direct staff to create the amending bylaws. So that's what we've done here. We've done the consolidations and housekeeping, and we're presenting it tonight. And so just very briefly, because the RFD was quite long, there's all kinds of detail in there, but just a few highlights. So there's a new cover to help distinguish it from the previous ones. Just, if there's different copies hanging around, we can tell them apart pretty easy. The proposed revisions that we're trying to get through, we're accommodating the North 48 aggregate quarry. We're accommodating the new Upper Base aggregate quarry in terms of designation and zoning. Similarly, with the location of the new landfill. Cannabis has come up a few times, and that's addressed throughout these housekeeping and proposed amendments. And in the past, there was a term used, but now there's distinguishing between bars and restaurants. There's two different categories. The terminology before, I think, was eating and drinking establishments or something like that. I would like to talk about Schedule A for a minute. So Schedule A is a provision for fines. Currently, staff does not have that tool. There's no provisions. If there's a zoning infraction, there's no provisions for staff to be able to issue tickets or any kind of fines. So Schedule A is attempting to address that. I've looked at it. General plans and zoning bylaws, the amending process can be quite long. You have to have a public hearing. You have to go through the minister. So what I'm recommending is a change to the Schedule A, and at the very top, I'm recommending that we delete the reference to the general plan so that we're only referencing the zoning bylaw. And I'm also recommending that we add a provision, and the provision is 2.49, and what it says is Schedule A, by way of council resolution, can be changed without an amendment to the zoning bylaw. Number 899. So this provision in the future would enable council to change the structure for the fines through a resolution, an easier, quicker process than having to go through a full, complete general plan or zoning bylaw amendment process, including public hearing and ministerial approval. And so the recommendations are basically to give first reading to both of these bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you for the update. Is that a motion, Kyle?
I'll recommend to council to make first reading of both of these bylaws. Do we need two separate motions, one for each bylaw? Can we just recommend to first reading for both bylaws? First reading for both bylaws.
The recommendation is one that council read first reading of bylaw 898, and that council give first reading to bylaw 899. I think that's the correct motion. Seconded by Councillor Lucasy. Any questions or comments, Mayor Bell?
Thank you. I don't want to get into it too deep because, again, we're not here, but you bring up the fact that we're changing from eating and drinking establishments to bar, but under the definitions, the restaurant isn't there. So, like in the new group, so that's been removed. I would like to see basically a mixture of the two. Have the original one, which is eating or drinking establishment, means a building a building where foods and beverages are offered for sale to the public for on or off-site consumption. This includes, but for this one, remove bars and pubs, but put full-service restaurants, cafes, food service, or takeout restaurants or lunchrooms. But just remove the bars and pubs, and then keep your bar as your definition here.
Mark?
I don't think the committee has the newest bylaws. I'm not sure. But in the copy I have, there is a definition for restaurant, no offense. Restaurant means a building or part of a building where food and beverages are offered for sale to the public for on or off-site consumption. This includes full-service restaurants, cafes, fast food or takeout restaurants, and lunchrooms, but does not include bars and pubs.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, that's not in our document.
Okay.
So that makes sense. That's fine. It's just it just wasn't here when I was reading it.
Mark?
And then briefly, the definition for bar means a licensed drinking establishment, the principal business of which is to serve any sort of alcoholic beverage to the public for consumption on the premises and includes a pub or brew pub.
But yeah, both of those work for me. I just didn't. It just wasn't here on the list of changes. It just the only change it referenced was bar. The former definition, eating and drinking establishments, has been removed and replaced by two definitions, bar and restaurant. But I couldn't see the restaurant section on the RFD.
Okay. Who had their hands up? Oh, Shepherd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to see this. A lot of work's been done to compile these recommended changes. A lot of historic headache issues are being cleaned up in this. You know, this council going forward will not have to approve perfectly good metal siding because it's going to be allowed. So I'm excited about the efficiencies that this is going to allow, both for council and for administration.
Any other questions or comments to the recommendation or to the motion? If not, ready to vote. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Thank you. Unanimous. Move to adjourn. Moved by Mayor Bell, seconded by Lucasy. All those in favor? Thanks for the evening.